In the evangelical fundamentalist church that I grew up in, people would sometimes bring up the, quote, apparent contradictions in the Bible, but only in order to show that they're not, in fact, contradictions. We call this harmonizing the Bible. I'll give you an example. The Gospel of Matthew says that after he betrayed Jesus, Judas hanged himself. But Acts says that falling head first, he burst open in the middle and all his guts spilled out. Well, this is an easy one. Obviously, the tree from which Judas hanged himself broke and he fell to his gory death. Boom, problem solved. Here's another one. Both Mark and Matthew describe an angel at the tomb of Jesus. But in Luke's gospel, when the women arrive at the tomb, they're met by two angels. It was pointed out to me that describing one angel doesn't logically preclude the possibility that there were, in fact, two angels. Nothing to see here. So this kind of smokescreen apologetic achieved the intended effect. I thought that there were 5 or 6 apparent contradictions in the Bible, and that they were easily solved with a bit of logical gymnastics. But then I actually read the Bible. The book opens up with 2 separate accounts of the creation of the world. The first one is in Genesis 1, 1:1 to 2:4, and the second older story is in Genesis 2:5 to 3:24. Go ahead and read those 2 accounts of creation and ask yourself, are humans created before other animals or after? Turns out it depends on which story you're reading. Is the first woman fashioned from the first man's rib, or are they both created simultaneously? Depends on which story you're reading. In the next book of the Bible, Exodus, God identifies as, quote, a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who reject me. Later, the prophet Ezekiel comes along declaring that, quote, a child shall not suffer for the iniquity of a parent, but the righteousness of the righteous shall be his own, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be his own. There's an entire book of the Bible, Leviticus, dedicated to detailed instruction for how to offer sacrifices. What animals are appropriate for what sacrifices? How do you kill them? Where do you splatter the blood? How do you wash your hands afterwards? Because God likes it just so. But later, God says through the mouth of the prophet Jeremiah, quote, in the day that I brought your ancestors out of the land of Egypt, I did not speak to them or command them concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. What? So did God have nothing to do with the writing of Leviticus after all? Was the psalmist right when he declared that God takes no delight in sacrifice? If I were to give a burnt offering, you would not be pleased? In the book of Numbers, the Israelites began to complain that God has rescued them from slavery in Egypt only to die out in the wilderness. Annoyed by this ingratitude, God vows to strike them with pestilence and disinherit them. But Moses reminds God that the surrounding nations have seen God guiding the Israelites around in a pillar of cloud and fire. And that if God kills them now, then the nations will think it's because God couldn't finish the job of bringing the Israelites to the promised land, and God will look like a failure. God is convinced by Moses' argument and decides to forgive the Israelites' grumbling instead of smiting them. God changes God's mind. But then, just a few chapters later, we're told that God never changes God's mind. And that's just the first 4 books of the Bible. There's plenty more. Here's Proverbs 26:4. Do not answer fools according to their folly, or you will be a fool yourself. And here's the very next verse. Answer fools according to their folly, or they will be wise in their own eyes. If you kept a list, you'd be blown away by how many blatantly contradictory proverbs like that there are. Jesus is reported to be in the lineage of King David. But how many generations are between them? Do a little Bible study on that. Who exactly are the 12 apostles? Read all 4 Gospels and try to make a list of them. Read the accounts of Jesus' resurrection in all 4 Gospels and write down all the details. Not only are there differences, but they are irreconcilable. I could go on, but there's no need to belabor this point. Some people will hear this and think that I'm trying to disparage or discredit the Bible. I'm not. I love the Bible. But I want to love the Bible as it actually is, not some anesthetized system of belief that I've created about the Bible. Remember, the Bible that we have is a library. If you're writing a book, it's good practice for your editor to hunt out and correct contradictions and inconsistencies in the book. But you'd never walk into a library and ask the librarian, "Are there any contradictions in here?" The question itself doesn't even make any sense. If you had a library in which every book is in perfect agreement with every other book, setting aside the fact that this is a practical impossibility, what you would have is a boring library. It turns out that harmony is not about every musician playing the same exact note. It's about hearing the beauty in a multitude of notes being held together. The fact that the biblical authors question and challenge and expand on and disagree with one another isn't a weakness of the Bible. It's what gives the Bible character. The contradictions are the good stuff. They're where the juice is, and they're meant to be meditated on, savored like honey on your tongue.